Great. Yeah, I don't want to take too much of your time for questions. Obviously, great meeting so far. FMCSA has been here through the whole weekend, and we've been talking about trucking everywhere from the Rose Garden to my appearances around the country. So we wanted to be sure to have this be an opportunity just to signal just how important this is and how much we want to work with the trucking sector on all the challenges that are coming our way. You can tell from the range of questions up there the different things that we're dealing with: technology, safety, supply chain concerns. So the texture of the issues has changed a little bit compared to, let's say, 1 year ago, but the importance of them is the exact same.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for making time. This is very generous, and we appreciate you making time to speak to us. You touched on this during your address, the driver shortage and efforts by the Biden administration and your department to address it. The driver shortage has been a big theme here at this conference. If I can shift your focus to speaking directly to a potential driver, a person who's interested in pursuing a career in trucking, what would you say to she or he as they are thinking about which trajectory to pursue in their lives, and why pursuing trucking would be beneficial?
Yeah, well, I think the message is this is a career with great earning potential and great importance to the country and to the economy. One that the country increasingly recognizes as absolutely essential, and that can be the basis for supporting a family through an entire working career. But also that there are some things that make this a challenging career, make it tough, and we're working very hard to address those. So that also, if you're entering the career at a time like this, you're entering at a time when my department and a lot of others are looking at issues from the availability of parking to the way people get paid, and everything in between, in order to make sure that it's a better career than it's ever been.
Okay, thank you.
Next one, if it's okay. I actually had a chance to speak to a owner of a fleet. It's a kind of a mid-sized fleet, a couple hundred trucks based here in San Diego, and he was talking to me about the challenge with, California has these rules for, you have to have a certain number of zero-emission vehicles, and all the other investments that they're being asked to make. And he said, but then you turn around and there's not an adequate amount of charging infrastructure. And so I wonder how the infrastructure package will be spent to address that problem.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm glad that the infrastructure package wasn't one-dimensional. You remember all those debates we were having 2 years ago? Is this infrastructure? Is that infrastructure? And there were some people saying, well, if it isn't a road or a bridge, it doesn't count. And we were saying the internet is infrastructure, pipes are infrastructure, and the grid is infrastructure, and they're all connected. So the fact that we're building out more on the grid side, and obviously that's outside of my lane, that's the Department of Energy, but we work very closely with them. Of course we know that you can't have tomorrow's car and truck fleets running on yesterday's grid. That's why we're upgrading the grid. And it's going to be challenging. I mean, there's no question. I sat down with the truck stop owners, and they talked about the issues they're going to have with just a different level of load. But at the end of the day, pound for pound, it can also be a lot more efficient than moving liquids all over the country. It's just a transition, the likes of which we haven't had to make in the whole life of the automotive and trucking sectors, which is why this decade is going to be very challenging and full of enormous potential. And there's a lot of business opportunity in that too.
Following up on that, just with the clean energy idea, what sort of work, there's a lot of talk about charging infrastructure, but long-haul trucking can't run on battery electric vehicles. What sort of work is the department, is the FMCSA focusing on hydrogen, natural gas, renewable diesel, those sorts of ways that can actually decarbonize trucking, long-haul trucking?
Look, obviously the picture for over-the-road trucking is different than it is for light-duty vehicles and personal cars. We recognize that. What's the same is obviously just the imperative in terms of our climate, with not a lot of time, and the fact that the choices we make at the policy level can make a difference. So you'll see a lot of our policies are set up in a way that is platform neutral. It depends. So on cars, we placed a pretty big bet on electric, right? But a lot of the regulations you'll see around emissions don't tell you how to get to zero emissions. They just say you got to get there. Because we recognize that I've seen deeply impressive things on the EV, full-scale semis that are electric, but also a lot of talk around hydrogen. The clean diesel conversation, like the sustainable aviation fuel conversation, is one about how we can bridge to a cleaner place than we've been. And also, if you look at things like some of the incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act, I think they can really help here. So we get that it's not all the same, and there's going to be a lot of particular challenges, but also different opportunities around trucking, right? Especially because, first of all, unlike a car, where your second most expensive possession is one you don't use 96% of the time, trucks are designed to be moving all the time, which means when you have a fuel savings, they pay back a lot more quickly. It's definitely true on the electric side if you look at what's beginning to come onto the market for the kind of small and middle markets that these EV semis can operate in. And there are also things in terms of the use pattern of how frequently you're going to the same place or what happens when you're at warehouses that actually create a lot of opportunity for low or zero emission refueling. So we're not naive about the difference between long distance trucking and what's possible even today for privately owned light duty passenger vehicles. But I think the end of the story has to be the same, which is that how we had a transformation that created American jobs that got us to a cleaner climate.
Yeah, Secretary, you mentioned the massive supply chain disruptions we've seen the past couple of years, and really going back to World War II, maybe the worst we've seen this across all modes, as you put it. When you think back and you think the lessons learned from this experience, how do you think that the department and industry can work together to build more resilient supply chains and kind of spin it forward and become smarter and hopefully the next time we see a pandemic or something else that's very disruptive, be in a better position to.
So I think right now we're processing these lessons in real time, but some things we know are going to be good moves. One is data sharing, just getting a better sense of the data. I think people would assume that a cargo owner has at least as much information about where their cargo is as you'd have for an airline passenger, and it's not actually true. We can do something about that without going after proprietary data, and that's what we're working on with Flow. The second thing is looking at inventory and labor models that are so down to the minute, so just in time, so close to the edge that there's no room for dealing with surprises, especially when you have a welcome surprise of a lot of demand. And I think that has hit every sector in transportation in a somewhat comparable way. A third is figuring out what kind of flexibilities are appropriate. I think we were pretty committed to partnering with industry on waivers and things that could create a little bit of breathing room. But we need to step back and say, okay, is there a more systematic way to think about how we would do that if we were faced with these circumstances again? So there's definitely a lot of lessons to be learned. I think we're still in the middle of learning them, but those are some of the things we're going to go after right away.
Thanks.
Stepping back from policy just a little bit, we've been tracking rising incidents of double brokering, where we have duly authorized carriers and brokers taking a load, rebrokering it at a lower rate, and keeping some of the difference. And the DOT OIG was involved in one of those cases. What's the DOT doing, if anything, about cases of double brokering where the duly authorized carriers and insured bonded carriers and brokers are involved, and what can legitimate truckers and what can legitimate brokers do to help the DOT combat the problem?
Robin, I'm going to turn to you for a little more.
I kind of felt like that was
technical
going to
answer on
happen.
that. And I can tell you, look, the enforcement side, I got to defer to OIG on a lot of that, but I'll just editorialize a bit, and then Robin will have the more substantive answer. The environment that we're in, especially what it did to spot rates, creates all kinds of opportunities for abuse. And I think we've seen that, again, in every sector that touches shipping, that it just becomes that much. Anytime you have shortage of availability, and anytime you have stupendous profitability on certain routes or certain situations, you see some unsavory actors start to look at how they can take advantage of that. But you might be able to speak more specifically to the double brokering piece.
What I can speak specifically to is that we believe in broker transparency. We have an active petition right now, and you probably well know that, so I can't speak with any great detail to you right now. But I would say keep your eyes open in the early part of 2023 for some additional information that will come back out that will be helpful to you, and we can talk to you in more detail at that time.
Is there a protocol that, if I'm a driver and I suspect I've gotten double brokered, or if I'm a customer and I know I've been double brokered, is there something I should do with your office, or do I just kind of have to figure my way out of it?
We would like to hear from you if that's happening to you, and I can leave you with some contact information before we leave here.
Thank you.
I'm gonna jump in. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah,
Sorry,
so-
you
If
have-
any, or
You haven't
one
had
question for
I have
each
not,
person.
no.
Not
Sorry.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll actually bring it back kind of full circle, going back to kind of Eugene's question a little bit about just making the trucking industry just a more appealing job, I guess, for the driver force. So driver detention time is something that is brought up a lot as a really big issue in this industry. So does the administration have any plans for reducing that detention time for drivers at shipper facilities?
Yes. So I'm pretty fired up about this because here you have a situation where we don't have as many driver hours available as we need in the economy, and simultaneously we're wasting drivers' time. And the first thing that we're doing that I think can help us get after this is the compensation study, because of course part of this is just a consequence of the compensation model that exists, which is when you're paid by the load or you're paid by the mile and you're not paid by the hour. Nobody is financially responsible for wasting a driver's time other than the driver.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, we have some high road employers who absorb some of that, but it's not like that's a good answer economically either in terms of the system as a whole. There should be enough economic incentive for that detention not to happen in the first place. Which brings me to the second piece, which is working with the ports and engaging them. And we have a more energetic FMC and a more empowered FMC thanks to the Ocean Shipping Reform Act than we've had, I think, in a long time. And I'm looking to them to help here too. And going beyond just the kind of hard enforcement side, wanting to engage with the port. Not all ports are alike, and not all warehouse operations are alike. Some are doing better than others. Figuring out the best practices and what we can do to help spread them with carrots and sticks, I think is going to be important. But the bottom line is we can't go on like this, where we don't have enough capacity on the trucking side, and simultaneously some of that precious capacity is sitting there waiting for a load, waiting for a ticket, waiting for a chance to turn around and do their job.
Can I squeeze in one more? It's just the biggest obstacle that you have faced with the Flow initiative. I would just love to know. Is it just getting shippers to play ball and share their data? Or
It's early because it's a pilot and because it works on a handshake. I would say, I wouldn't say there's anything out there that's kind of holding us back any more than our ability to kind of stand it up in the first place, because it's totally new. So we're working through, okay, what are these data points? How can we use them? How can we exchange them? One possible obstacle I could see eventually is, as we grow it, people starting to be kind of jealously protective of their data. We're not going after anybody's proprietary data. We're just trying to get information that it would make sense for everybody to have. So we may need to have that conversation later, but right now, it's so new that I'm very satisfied with the level of participation we've got, and very mindful that it's on us to, I think, get these kind of prototypes going so that we can all satisfy ourselves that it's going to meet its potential. Is there anything more concrete on the detention bit that I missed? Because you're closer to some of it.
I would only add that these are data-intensive studies. They will take a little bit of time. They will be incredibly important for us to take concrete steps. As they will take a little time, we hope to come back with some updates along the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. We appreciate it.